Vores første speaker er Richard Clark, der har en lang baggrund inden for kommunikation og marketing i den professionelle sektor. Har blandt andet arbejdet 15 år i Arsenal i Premier League, så har også set toppen af den professionelle pyramide, så vi ser frem til også fra UCN Sports Management på Professionshøjskolen UCN til at byde velkommen til det kommercielle spor i samarbejde med idrætsmøder. Og første gæst er Richard Clark fra England, som vi fløj over i går, som har den her keynote tale eller præsentation. So Richard, welcome to Denmark. Very excited to hear you speak about MARCOM strategy and trends in sports. So welcome, and I'll give the stage to you to introduce yourself more specifically.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. It's probably best to clap first, because you might not be clapping at the end, who knows. So anyway, good morning, my name is Richard Clark, and once again, thank you for the invitation. Very pleased to be speaking here today. The topic I was asked to discuss was marketing and communications, and what I've seen in terms of the business of sports in recent times. So I'll introduce myself and who I am and what I've done and why hopefully I have got something worthy of listening to. I'm currently I run a sports content agency called Sports Content Strategy. It kind of does the obvious thing, and we've got a lot of clients that I've been working with in esports and the Premier League and football. We're doing a lot of work with tennis at the moment, a lot of work on overseas strategy and international strategy, which seems to be a real demand at the moment within the market. So I run that agency, but I also am a lecturer at an organisation called UCFB, which is the Football Business University based out of Wembley. So I teach out of an executive box at Wembley most weeks, and there's an online version, the Global Institute of Sport, which is effectively master's degrees online. So I wrote a master's course on sports media and marketing, and I also have been running one on football communications and digital marketing. So I'm in that realm of marketing, communications, content, social media, digital, CRM as well. One of my pet projects, my pet idea is the fact that content is not considered as important, or it has not been considered as important as marketing and communications traditionally. And that is changing. And I think that will change going forward. That's what I'm doing now. What I've done in the past, probably the thing that always crops up in the headline of my introduction, as Kenneth pointed out, was my time at Arsenal. So I used to work for the local paper at Arsenal. I used to work for national newspapers. And then we won a trophy. We won the FA Cup and the league in 2002. And I was in the town hall as part of the covering it as part of the celebrations. And the club said, we need a webmaster. That's how old it was, a webmaster they were called. So I became the club's first ever full-time website editor. And scroll through 13 years, and I'm in charge of not only the website, but all editorial content. So our program, our magazine. We had a TV channel for a time. We had a TV show that went to 100 countries. App development, so anything editorial I was in charge of at that time, including the editorial line, which is a very difficult thing to hold if you're a major football club with a lot of critics out there and stories every day. I did, in my time at Arsenal, come across this person, so I thought I'd play to the crowd by bringing him up. So he came over as a 15, 16-year-old. So I'd probably interviewed him, I would suggest, more times than anyone else, because I was club media. Always got on with him very well. I know, but I liked him, okay? And I still do. And he was always good with me. So I just thought I'd Yeah, throw that one in. I moved after my time at Arsenal, and bear in mind, my time at Arsenal was taking us onto the social media age. So, I took the club onto all the social media apps out there with the exception of TikTok. So I literally sent the first tweet. The first 200 pictures on Instagram were from my phone. I literally had to lobby the club to get onto social media. And when I left, we were the third biggest sports team in the world on Twitter, the fifth biggest sports team in the world on Facebook. And we got there without winning a trophy. So I think we did a reasonable job of, for want of a better phrase, attacking the new social media age. I'm going to talk about how that social media has changed going forward. But I moved to Major League Soccer to run digital media and communications for a club called the Colorado Rapids. So I'd gone from, I would argue, a top 6, top 8 club in Europe in terms of football to, in terms of sports clubs in Europe, I would say Arsenal were top 10 perhaps, to the 5th biggest sports club in Denver. So very different challenge, didn't have the history, had to work much harder at the story, but we managed to treble their social media. But, we had a very different experience in terms of content and sponsorship. Content and salesmanship was very different in the US as opposed to the UK, and I learned that a lot. Came back after a couple of years. My wife got homesick. I would have stayed in Colorado. Moved to the Indonesian League. My consultancy started. I got a 2-year gig working for the Indonesian League, who, yet again, big challenge there because US soccer, very well organized, culturally not important, but there are fans. Here, very badly organized, culturally massively important, and there are a huge amount of fans. Indonesian teams, one of the teams I work with, a team called Persib Bandung, are the about 20th, 21st biggest club on social media in terms of social media reach in the world. They're a massive brand, but they don't monetize it. I work for the league. In terms of branded content, digital video, work with clubs like Bali United, hard job, but someone has to do it. And I work with this guy. This guy has the greatest job in football. He works for Persib Bandung. He is paid to keep the rain away on match day. Good work if you can get it, huh? So yet again, we took a very aggressive approach, not aggressive approach, but a very strategic approach to social media. The Indonesian League had been banned for political corruption just before I joined, and I joined when it was given its license back. Long story, I won't go into it now. But what we had to do is relaunch the league on all social media, including Instagram. We launched on Instagram at the same time that Manchester United launched on Instagram. Manchester United always very slow in terms of launching on social media platforms. We got to 1 million first because of a very specific strategy we had based around cultural nuance, cultural resonance, and being very, very targeted and strategic. And then a couple of years, that gig ended after a couple of years. I also went to all the islands, worked with all the clubs in terms of digital transformation. So I actually tried to push them forward in terms of digital story and CRM and just making them digital ready. So going to these places like Sumatra and Borneo and Bali and Sulawesi and all these places. Absolutely fantastic experience. Unfortunately, that ended. So I went to work as a consultant for the AFC in the UAE League. So we've gone for another experience here. Very well organized, very well structured, lovely stadiums, very little fan interest. But they had an interest in, their desire was to grow in terms of sustainability. Make the clubs not just dependent on somebody writing a check at the end of the season. And that's where I've developed my career in the bringing out the sporting stories, turning them into content, the specific stories around specific clubs, turning them into content and making that content serve business objectives, whatever they may be. Often it's going to be reach, revenue, brand, data. Okay. I'm also a journalist. I write for a cricket paper. I wrote a book on cricket. I won't talk a lot about cricket here, but I could do all day. I'm thinking this might not be the market for a cricket chat, but I can talk cricket all day. And my podcast is called Sports Content Strategy, as is my organisation, my company. There's 95-hour-long episodes around all the issues I'm going to talk about today, which is marketing, communications, digital and social. I also did a podcast on Indonesian football as well. So let's get into the meat of this. Let's talk about what I have found, what I've seen, themes that are cropping up in terms of sports marketing and communications. And bear in mind, I'm at an interesting place because I'm a veteran in this world. There aren't too many people in this world who have a 20, 25-year career in sports digital, because it hasn't existed that long, who has the experience of going through taking organizations onto social media. And therefore, I believe I can call out some of the nonsense that is talked around the way sports and social media in particular and digital interact. I've also worked for clubs. I've also worked outside clubs. I also work on a weekly basis with a load of students sitting in front of me who are Gen Z, and are sitting there with a very different focus on what sports is, what digital is, what social is, what communications is, what marketing is. So I like to think, and hopefully Kenneth did too, because otherwise he wouldn't have invited me here, that I'm in that position where I can see a lot of the angles. And I've just come up with a few themes for you today. So let's talk about and I'm aware, by the way, that this is a room that might be full of professional sports, volunteers, social organizations. So I'm going to talk about elite sports and I'm going to talk about the business of sports. What I'm hoping for you to do today is to be able to take what I'm talking about here and reflect it onto what you do. So when we're talking, and I'm going to talk a lot about football, because I think that's obviously the global game and it is my experience as well. So I'll use a lot of examples from football. But yeah, here's a diagram, okay? It's let's not get into lecturing mode, but it's I quite like this diagram because it very simply talks about the ecosystem of sports and where the money goes within sport. And despite everything that is said about the importance of TV rights, the importance of sponsorship, the importance of this, the importance of that. For me, fans are still at the hub of it. And every club and every organization will say, we put our fans first. And I would argue that given their importance and their ability to be at the hub of the reason the media companies pay money, why the brands pay money, why the leagues exist, I would argue the fans are still not given the significance they should be given. And football clubs and football organizations are still making an assumption that the fans will always be there, and they're treated as these other fans. They are an homogenous group. There is a lump of fans sit over there. We have to feed the media, feed this, feed that, and the fans, there's a group of fans over there, and they all think the same, and they all act the same. And they're always going to be there. And I think increasingly, given where media is these days and where sports is these days, I think that assumption should be getting weaker and weaker. And I think there's a complacency that we need to address here. Because I see the modern fan, the digital and social native fan, as a bit different. And I see football clubs and football organizations, maybe I'm talking about England here, communicating them to them in a very Web 1 way, i.e. broadcasting to them. It's a one-way communication. At least Web 2 is more two-way and more social. And clubs are very much still, despite everything, still sitting in their ivory towers and projecting a semi-autocratic, I would say, way of talking to their fans. Certainly not inclusive. certainly not two-way. And I'm also going to talk about how CRM feeds into this. That the marketing of football and the marketing of sport in particular still seems to be reliant on often TV hype to tell its story. At the elite end, I know at the voluntary sector it'll be different, but certainly if you look at the Premier League, it's gone around the world based on the strength of innovative TV deals. And the TV hype has told the story. And the TV is what has pushed the game around the world. I would argue that TV is not the only game in town, as we'll talk about going forward. There's other ways to get your content out there. And also, some of these brand stories around clubs and their marketing is very tired. Their CRM is very tired. If I look at the audience that sits in front of me on a weekly basis in my lectures, they're not dismissive of social media, but they're skeptical of social media. They're not sure that it's serving them in the right way. And that narrative has changed over the last 10 years. 15 years ago, it was the greatest thing in marketing. Now everyone's saying it's toxic. Okay, well, if you're setting up a marketing channel that's going to use that, you might have to rethink your approach going forward. So I picked out a few themes. The first one, attention is currency. Now, we live in an attention economy. We know that. And the assumption of sport is that attention reflects quality. The better you are, the more attention you get. Real Madrid, Barcelona, Manchester United, Liverpool, the Arsenal, I better put them in. These are the best teams, they get the greatest attention. Brøndby, Odense, not quite so good, get less attention globally. Okay? So quality and attention are congruent. And it's still true to a certain extent because of TV's focus, but there's changes in patterns of media consumption and media production. You don't need a TV company or a newspaper to get your story out. So what we're seeing is sporting organizations gaining attention, whoops-a-daisy, over-gaining attention, or sort of over-indexing in terms of attention, even though the quality is poor. So if you look at, has anyone heard of hashtag United? Okay, right, so you heard of hashtag United. So hashtag United they were effectively a Parks football team that started a YouTube channel. And then they turned themselves into a non-league club in England. They actually joined the pyramid. So now they are 7 promotions away from the Premier League. Okay, so they're at a low level. But their YouTube channel has got 650,000 subscribers. That's pretty much bigger than any club outside the Premier League. And I looked, and FC Copenhagen have a 1/10 of that. They're not a high-quality football team. But their ability to gain attention also means there's monetization not only in their YouTube channel, but there's monetization in their sponsorships. They're taking sponsorship dollars and euros away from bigger organizations. If you look at KSI Logan Paul, anyone heard of KSI and Logan Paul? Okay, so you saw that fight, okay? That fight, KSI Logan Paul, 2 million pay-per-view buys, puts it in the top 5 boxing pay-per-views of all time. They're really bad boxers, man. They're terrible, okay? You look at KSI versus Tommy Fury, Dylan Dennis versus Mr. Paul there, 1.3. These are huge numbers in pay-per-view, right? And also, someone like KSI is really interesting. There's a case study in KSI, actually. Has KSI got any resonance over it? There's a young group there that's nodding for everything I say in this one. There's no disrespect. Older people are going, what the hell are you talking about? Anyway, but all right, so KSI, YouTube influencer, gamer. So he's gone from gaming, playing FIFA on YouTube, into rapping, into movies, into pay-per-view boxing. And what he's managed to do is take his audience and get them to pay at every stage. That is blooming hard these days. really hard. At Arsenal one time, they were talking about setting up Arsenal hotels as a sort of sideline chain. The ability to take our Arsenal audience and turn them into a hotel audience, really hard. He's taking his audience, okay, it's less of a cultural leap, I get that, but he's taking his audience with him. Poor standard. You look at Arsenal Fan TV, fan YouTube channels, very low production qualities to start with, pretty much rant TV in my opinion, however, gaining a huge audience. Indonesian tennis influence. I've been working with the ATP and looking at Indonesia. It's got a very small footprint for tennis in Indonesia. This is incredibly poor tennis. It's getting 11 million views per stream. The Savannah Bananas. Anyone heard of the Savannah Bananas? Fantastic. We've got one person at the back. They are the lowest level of minor league baseball. But what they've done is tell a different story. This guy bought an old tired club, turned them into the most fan-friendly and pretty much gimmicky baseball team there is out there. They have the Savannah Nanas, who are an octogenarian 80-year-old set of cheerleaders. The pitcher will be dancing as he pitches. They will pitch in kilts. It's okay. It's a different type of sport. But what they've done with it is that they are now going on a world tour. Not only are they selling out every game and selling beer and a hot dog and a ticket for a tenner kind of thing, or $10. They are now going on a world tour. They are selling out major league sports stadiums. So what we have here, via different routes to fan engagement and communications and marketing, we're busting that story that quality leads to attention. And I think there's lessons for sport within that in terms of the way we tell our story. We don't just rely on get the best players, win the trophy, get loads of money, get loads of players, blah, 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 and we'll protect our story. I'll talk about a little bit more about that going forward. Rubbish numbers. You see what I did there? I changed it. But one thing about digital and social is everything's measured, right? Everything's measured. Everything can be analyzed. This very old quote from a 19th century businessman saying, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half. That's still true today. In fact, I think it's even more true, even though everything can be tracked. Facebook keep on getting sanctioned for miscalculations of their data. Okay? When I was at Arsenal, we got 30 million on Facebook in my time there very early on. We thought we were creating Arsenal fans who happened to be Facebook users. No, we were creating Facebook users who happened to be Arsenal fans. And when EdgeRank came in and they cut off the pipe, we had nowhere to go. And Facebook said, now you need to pay to contact the audience that certainly we felt we'd created. So we've got here Facebook. You know, who's auditing Facebook's numbers? Not just Facebook, all the social media platforms. Sorry, was that a question?
No. What are you asking?
Can we believe social media numbers? Exactly. So we agree. Sorry, I thought you asked a question. But no, so I've been a marketer, I've been a social media guy, I've gone to Arsenal and say, look how we're growing on social media, look at these numbers. No one at the CEO level asked me, okay, who's auditing those numbers? Are they true? Because pretty much a quarter of your social media, any social media feed is going to be bots. We know that. And now we've got a situation, Augustine Fu is a guy who writes on social media and digital ad fraud in particular. And he's looking at this and saying, well, look, human usage is only going up by the yellow line. Digital ad spend is growing dramatically. What's fueling that? His argument is, you're paying for bots to click on your adverts. You can still present as a marketer a nice big number. Is it true? Do we know where our advertising is going? It's a question we need to ask. And we look at what Manchester United have done. Manchester United did a piece of work in 2012 to say they had 600 million fans around the world. And they did it a couple of years ago and said we now have 1.1, and they're interesting, their investor presentation said 1.1 billion fans and followers around the world. 1 in 7. Who's a Man United fan here? Okay, so it's not 1 in 7, is it? Okay, so our straw poll today says that may be a little bit smelly. But also, look at what they said. It says 1.1 fans and followers. Okay, so we aggregating all the followers? We're adding YouTube to X, to Facebook, to Instagram? Because I'm one fan, but on Arsenal, I follow all of those. So I'm one fan, but I'm 4 followers. So what's that saying? Also, what's a fan? This study, you could put in more than one favorite team. Okay, you could put in more than one favorite team. There was a study done 10 years ago that said the average fan, the average football fan, follows 7 teams. So what does being a follower mean? What does a fan mean? Because if they've got 1.1 billion fans, they could all pitch in $2 and buy the club. They're not going to do that, are they? But the thing is, the investor presentation says 1.1 billion fans and followers, not defining what they are, with leaving huge gaps there. When it gets to DHL, the sponsor, they're just saying 1.1 billion fans. When it gets to the media, they're saying 1.1 billion fans. When it gets to Man United perhaps trying to sell the club and opening up a kiosk at Davos, I think that number helps. Digital allows us to track everything, but it also, we have not scrutinized enough of our numbers, which leads me on to the need for first-party data. If I were to go back into my time at Arsenal again, I would be saying, forget everything, let's just get first-party data. Here's a headline from The Economist a few years ago, sorry, it's a bit grainy, where they came out and said data is the new oil. Well, it is, in a sense that it fuels everything, and it is in the sense that both data and oil need to be refined to be useful. But I would say there's a major difference in that oil is scarce and data is everywhere and it's only growing. And we do not spend enough time to analyze it. We have more data than we can actually analyze at the moment. And we will only be growing in our ways to harvest data. And personalization is the key. Because increasingly, the students I talk to in Gen Z are cynical about the surveillance economy. Being tracked everywhere and being presented something that I'm told I want. If you're dealing with first-party data that you have actively given, then you are in the realm of fulfilling the CRM mantra of offering the right message to the right person at the right time on the right platform. And this can be done by the CRM at the most basic level, can be done for free by any organization that has one volunteer who knows what they're doing via an Excel spreadsheet and an email. Easily enough to fulfill that right message, right time, right platform, right person. But football, of course, is different because first-party data, I'm exchanging it for a service. Football deals in zero-party data where I'll actively give my email address and my details to a club because I believe in them, I trust them. If you're in the realm of zero-party data, and if you're in the realm of trusting an organization, that is manna from heaven for anyone who knows how to communicate effectively and use a CRM system with skill. Let's talk about social media a bit, because I've been critical of social media, and I will continue to be so, but it's still incredibly useful. It's still your spokesperson, it's still your brand, it's still your connection. I don't know, this was a big tweet for a period of time. West Brom, a club in the Midlands in England, second or first year, they go between the two. I don't know what they do in terms of racism or anti-racism or community work. I don't know what they do. All clubs will do some work on this. I do know that tweet. That tweet was they tweeted something out about Black Lives Matter, or anti-racism. This guy comes back and says, pathetic, please cancel my season ticket. The club goes back and says, you won't be missed. Okay? My point is this. That is their spokesperson. That is their brand. That also, I'm thinking, is a 25-year-old. So you've got your head of communications who have been in that job for 20, 25 years, who's 50, 60, he or she, very experienced. But where the rubber hits the road, it's that 25-year-old tweeting. And I think we should close that connection. If you look at these couple, certainly let's just talk about the top one, Ajax. Take your ball and go outside. It's what Johan would have wanted. That was tweeted on Johan Cruyff's birthday. From a social media perspective, that's a pretty average tweet. No GIF, no video, no emoji, no picture. The engagement's fantastic because it's on brand. Okay? The person enacting the social media strategy is aware of the brand of Ajax vis-a-vis Johan Cruyff, and it hits the nail on the head. It's simplistic, it's emotional. It breaks all the rules of engagement, but it got engagement for that reason, because it's connected. This was connected. I wonder if that social media executive talked to his or her boss. I wonder. Because I tell you what, it's a brave social media executive who puts that out without speaking to their boss. What you want to be is in a position where you're so connected that the social media executive has the license to do that and knows that such brave content, and it is brave, will be treated well up the chain of command. Just a word of time. Let's talk about AI content. Now, AI, we know what AI is, and the most recent text to video examples that have come out are fantastic, and there's the potential for it to, in essence, hollow out the film and video industry, and certainly the advertising industry. And if I was running a multi-club group in terms of content, I would be all over AI like a rash, just because of its ability to pump out content. It would still need to be finished and adapted by human hands, but so much of content that we put out now is what I call average intelligence content. It's meh content, it's okay content. And okay isn't good enough to cut through. Yes, it's important to understand, if you're a football club or you're a sports club, what your fans want. You need to do audits, you need to hit them with content that is designed correctly to do the job that you design it to do. That could be, that solution could be visual, it could be written. We need to adapt in that sense. But in terms of content that cuts through, it is getting harder and harder to cut through, and harder to make a real difference, okay? Instagram made me a good photo editor. Right? The tools are improved. Instagram made my stuff visual, right? I took a snap and it turned into something more artistic. I've got apps on my phone that I've made very decent YouTube videos that have got hundreds of thousands of views. My ability to create content has improved as the tools have improved. But it has for everybody. So what cuts through? Given that, as one of my old CMOs said to me, Arsenal are a media company with a football club attached. This is an important question because you need to be creating content that cuts through and stories that cut through. And if you look at this guy, my young table, who's that? Who's that? Mr. Beast, there we go. I'm being ageist there, but I'm assuming they all know the answer. So Mr. Beast, standout content. Why? Because first thing he did was study the algorithm, study how it worked. Then he made content and plowed all that content into making more content. But more importantly, he had a purpose. He stands for something above and beyond just getting clicks, just making money. He's supposedly the YouTube's biggest philanthropist, right? That's quite a title. these days. He's giving money to people, he's putting on stunts, he's making them visually appealing. But having a basis on technical skill and adding purpose to it, okay, and presenting it in a spectacular way is a way that he has cut through. And he's now moving into TV shows and he's doing the Beast Burger as well. So he monetizes in different ways. He's allowed to monetize, but his story is being a philanthropist. We're also in a situation, just aware of time, we're also in a situation of narrative control never before, because the means of production of content has changed and the routes to distribution have changed. You've got a situation where Man City make a documentary with their production crew. Ryan Reynolds buys a football club with a Netflix show in mind, knowing that his company can produce it. Taylor Swift gets turned down to make a movie of her concert, of her Eras tour. So she makes it herself. And these go on to be hugely successful. Margot Robbie has an idea for the Barbie movie, and it's not so the actress has a production company, she contacts the producers, and then it gets written. That's a complete about face of what it used to be. It used to be you write something, you go to a producer, you get a production company, and then you hire an actor. It's the other way around. Because it's starting from the position where the costs of making content have gone down so low in relative terms, that you can make high-level content at a lower cost. And it also means you control the narrative, not only in terms of production, but in terms of communication. David Beckham, he did a documentary, yet again, produced by his own company. The clever thing about what he did is that he didn't tell the sanitized story. And this is true of all of these to a certain extent, but particularly David Beckham. There's been some controversies in David Beckham's career, but he didn't shy away from them. He attacked them in his own way. So he kind of went to the story and then presented his truth. Now, by doing that, if you present if not warts and all, but at least a story with positive and negative in your own produced video, what you're doing is getting your truth out there first. And also, who's going to produce another Beckham documentary if you've answered all the questions? So by controlling the narrative, addressing some of the controversies in his career, his way, he's got his narrative out there, and also insulated him from another competitive story coming out in the next 10 years or so, or next five years, because he's done it. Okay? But that's all about production values controlling the story. Just a couple more. I've talked about the fact that football in particular, but sports clubs and media have always had this assumption that success and attention go together. For me, I think you need to think about success and story. An old director at Arsenal used to say, all you need is a winning team. All you need is a winning team. All you need is a winning team. And the first thing that happens if you don't have a winning team is you cut media access. You cut your story going out. That's what tended to happen. For me, I think you must, in the modern day and age, given that you've got a different audience out there, you must continue to tell your story, but not in a braver, less vanilla way, like the West Brom tweet. And this, into a sense, insulates you against a lack of success. On-pitch success is still critical. You can't do without it in terms of growing. Because it gives you TV money, gives you prize money, gives you sponsorships, gives you all that stuff. Also gives you talent development as well, potentially. But if you look at the example of Sunderland, a club that had an appalling run, they went from the Premier League they went from the top tier to the third tier in 2 years. What I'll say is this, if you look at their average crowds, so it was 41 in the Premier League, they went down in the league below, it went to 27,000. They went down to the league below, it went up by 5,000. And then it settled around the 30, They've gone back up to the championship and it's gone back up. What I'm saying is this: the narrative from professional athletes is success is everything. If we are not successful, if we fail, it will decimate the club. No, their crowds went down by a quarter. Didn't go down by 3/4, it went down by a quarter. Why? Because they have a long-standing tradition and history that kept people going. And that narrative needs to be sustained. Arsene Wenger used to say, your crowds are your potential. Okay? The potential of Sunderland was hit by going down, but it wasn't decimated. And what I'm saying is that sports clubs need to change the way their very strategy, which is around success is everything, story is nothing in comparison to sporting success. Sporting success is still important, but let's not give 99% of the resources to them. Let's maybe give 90 and 10% to that story, because that's your bedrock. That's your bedrock audience going forward. You look at Atletico Bilbao, recently won a trophy after 40 years. Okay? That's story, that's meaning. They only need to win a trophy every 40 years to get that, because of their special story that actually they deliberately and pointedly impinge their chances of success through an ethical stance. Actually makes their story better. And they get behind it. If you look at, so what I'm talking about is, for me, a lot of sports organizations don't have a coherent content strategy or even a coherent marketing strategy. Football clubs in particular, very siloed. If you look how most of them try and achieve a content strategy, it is by creating content, highlights, player interviews, fun stuff, community. Show the players, show you care. All the same. We've seen it all before. You're preaching to the converted. How are you going to win over people that are not diehard fans? Because most fans are linked through family or location. And that's the nub of it. Most football clubs or sports clubs are preaching to the converted. If you look at, they have a strategic failure. If you look at strategies that have worked in recent times, you look at Bleacher Report, House of Highlights. These are very Gen Z focused, not necessarily, certainly Bleacher Report doesn't have rights. House of Highlights didn't have rights either. They just ignored it for a bit and then became official. If you look at the Netflix route, that's worked. That's worked. Law of diminishing returns, but it has worked for Drive to Survive, albeit there's some BS numbers around that, in my opinion. If you look at Jessa, that's the creator route, to connect with a different audience. You go on YouTube, you find Jessa, he's creating NBA content that leads you into the NBA. Okay, there's a strategy there, that works as well. And then you've got the tactical rights and data route, which is Amazon. Amazon have bought Premier League rights in the UK, specifically around Christmas. Why? Because people join up around Christmas for free for a month, and they buy a load of things off Amazon, and Amazon get all the data. So even if they don't join up, they will get lots of data about potential clients, potential users. Jeff Bezos says, this is how Jeff Bezos uses content. Famous quote from Jeff Bezos. When we win a Golden Globe, we sell more shoes. That's the way he's using content to bring people in. My final point, and I suppose what I'm saying there is sport doing enough to win more fans? Because there's roots in, but they need to think a different way about how they connect. My final point is not so much something I've spotted, it's something I want. I want to be the world's first chief meaning officer. Because so much of sport is about meaning, not about marketing. I am an Arsenal fan. Manchester United could win everything. Liverpool can win everything. They can have the best social media, the best marketing, the best this, the best that, the best whatever. You don't get a penny out of me because my dad made me an Arsenal fan. And it means more to me than anything else. And certainly at Arsenal, when I joined, we had a head of communications, a head of marketing, a head of commercial, and I was effectively head of content. They were up here and I was down here. As we moved into the digital realm, what I was doing in content was driving everything, a lot of what they were doing. Okay? And when I came back from America, I looked for jobs as a VP of content. Didn't exist. Now I'm seeing jobs where a director of content reports into the CEO, so it's alongside those traditional department heads. For me, I think you need a chief meaning officer at the top. Certainly if you're in a passion project. You know? What do we get tattoos of? We don't get tattoos of Ford. No one's got a Ford tattoo. Mum, dad, your kids, if you're in the services, your football club, maybe a rock band. What brands? I can only think of one brand that you might have a tattoo of, unless I'm wrong and someone wants to prove me wrong, unless someone's got a Ford tattoo in the audience, but I will bet against it. Something like Harley Davidson, which is a lifestyle more than a brand. I think that you do get some of those, okay? But what do we get tattoos of? What are we prepared to mark our skin permanently on? Well, football's in there, sport's in there. So I want to be a chief meaning officer. And if you look at it, here's a European Clubs Association study. And content, actually, if you look at what makes fandom, the yellow at the top is family influence. So for everybody, so forget the marketing, forget the success, family influence. The interesting part is for the 16 to 24-year-olds, content is above family influence. Okay, this is the European Clubs Association. It's quite a big study. What I'm talking about is combining those two, 1 and 2. If you look at 1 and 2, call that meaning. Call that family influence and content to portray meaning on a regular, consistent, strategic basis. I want to be the world's first chief meaning officer for a football club, because that's actually what we're selling in sport. I've been speaking to a lot of people this morning, not talking about elite sport, but we're talking about recreational sport and the volunteering sector in Denmark and how that works for you from a social perspective. And what we learned post-pandemic was the importance of sport socially and emotionally. And this, as a chief meaning officer, that entrenches that. Because if you've got meaning, you can monetize it anyway. That's what we found in the pandemic, right? I paid for my cricket club subscription for the year because I wanted them to exist. I paid for something I didn't get. What do? I volunteered to pay for something I didn't get because it means something to me. If you concentrate on the meaning, you can concentrate on a bedrock of support and monetization over the long term. And that's actually what will appeal, and the purpose will appeal to Gen Z going forward. That's all I have to say. Do you have any questions or queries? Or do you disagree? And you can contact me there, by the way. I'm going to be around. Yes?
Have you looked into the Danish Super League? How the clubs are doing that? And they're really using so many medias.
I haven't. What I've looked into is, I think Danish clubs are indexing well in terms of fan engagement within their own organisations. And I think that's exactly the right way to go. There's been a lot of stories about clubs that have held up their season tickets levels, etc., with sponsorship as well. That's localised. The latter half of my job at Arsenal actually was all about appealing to international audiences. So Arsenal went on tour to Indonesia, to Vietnam, to China, to Japan, and they wanted to monetize that through overseas partnerships, and I had to create a content strategy. It would be interesting to see a club like Copenhagen, who are, I hope I don't offend anybody, but they're the smallest club in the last 16 of the Champions League, and they're doing it quite often these days. They are over-indexing. They're overperforming, I would argue, in that level, because they're consistently doing it. How many times have they been in there? Last 2 or 3 years? Last 16? What they don't have is an international story. What they don't have is a resonance in wider Europe that I can see. Now, sometimes you base that on a player. Sometimes you base that on a story. When West Ham moved to the stadium, the Olympic Stadium, the 2012 Olympic Stadium, they changed their badge. And on their badge, they put the word London. And when Arsenal used to go into Europe, lots of clubs, lots of countries used to say, we're playing Arsenal London, because nobody knew where Arsenal was, because it didn't have a geographical reference. West Ham tried to claim London. They tried to monetize London and be the club of London. I think they've got a long way to go. I think it's a stretch, but there we go. Be interesting to see what Danish clubs, what particularly Copenhagen could do, considering they have that story of success that I've talked about. They are successful. But what can they do to grow outside of Denmark? Because that's where there'll be lots of new money, right? And that'll be a different brand story. Yeah? So that's kind of what I've seen and what the challenge is. Because being the biggest club in Denmark is great, and it's one thing. But if Copenhagen keep on, and I'll just talk about Copenhagen because I know they've been successful in the Champions League. If they keep on doing that, their growth will be based on finding new revenue somewhere or another. Any other questions? Hello, Kenneth.
Just one question regarding knowledge sharing. I saw that you moved from Arsenal to Colorado Rapids. Rapids, Arsenal, owned by Stan Kroenke, also the owner of the Denver Nuggets from the NBA, Colorado Avalanche, NHL.
Yep.
And he owns also an NFL team.
He owns the Rams, yeah.
Correct. So was there knowledge sharing that boosted your work with digital content across those organizations?
No. This is, football clubs in particular, are very silo business. I would argue that I've talked about joined up strategies in terms of communication. I'll tell you something about sports organizations, elite football clubs. The brands are much bigger than the size of the club. Yeah? The name and the kudos attached is much bigger than the job you're asked to do. So they attract people who are actually more skilled and more senior than the job that they're asked to do. So what tends to happen is they tend to sort of silo and land grab a bit. So there's a huge lack of cohesion within football clubs and also between football clubs because of that kudos play. Look, whatever I do in my career, I'll be ex-Arsenal forever. That will be the biggest club I work for. And people, I just showed you a text this morning. I got someone complaining about the Arsenal website. Texting me, I haven't worked there for 10 years, but I'm still connected with it. And what I see in sports organizations is a lack of cohesion. It's actually marked out. So no is the answer to that for those reasons that I've talked about. Any other questions? I will be around for the next 2 days, so if you want to come and find me, and by the way, I'm a consultant, so here's my pitch for work. Please employ me. I'm a consultant and a lecturer. I also wash floors as I go out, so I've got a few skills. Any other questions? Or did you agree with everything I said? Did anyone disagree with what I said? First time I've ever had that. Okay. Come and find me if you want to chat further, but otherwise, thank you for your time.